Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the 7th episode of the Careers Launch Online webinar. My name is Angharad. I'm a careers volunteer at UKSEDS, and I will be your host for today's webinar, the Space Skills panel discussion. For those of you who aren't aware of UKSEDS, we're the UK's National Student Space Society. We're a group of students and young professionals running a variety of space-related events and competitions across the country. We also operate an early careers website called Space Careers UK, whose team runs this webinar series, which is designed to educate people on careers in the space sector. You can find all of the previous webinars that we've made so far through the Space Careers UK website or through the UKSEDS YouTube channel. They're all up on there. In addition, a recording of this panel will be available on the UKSEDS YouTube channel shortly afterwards, just after it finishes. So if you don't catch it at the right time, hello to everyone who's watching afterwards. We're going to be holding future webinars, so keep your eyes peeled for those on all of our social medias. We'd love to hear from you during the webinar, so if you are watching live on Twitter, you can make sure to use the hashtag CareersLaunchOnline. And if you scroll down on this website, we have a live chat for you to interact with each other, and you can submit questions into the Q&A box on this page. We'll be selecting some of these lively submitted questions to ask our panelists during the event, so if you do have any, please feel free to leave them. So today's webinar is going to be a panel discussion exploring the skills you may need in order to gain employment and embark on a successful career in the space sector. It's a great opportunity to hear from some space industry professionals who will be able to provide great insight for people who may be in the early stages of their career, or for any of you who are students who are thinking of a career in the space sector and you don't really know what kind of skills that you would need in the future. This will be a great webinar for you. The space industry is one of the most rapidly growing industries, especially in the UK. So all of us at UKSEDS really think it's a very exciting time to be getting involved. And it's great that you're thinking of preparing your skill set for fulfilling your career in one of the many different roles across the space industry. So without further ado, I'll stop talking now and I will introduce you to our four amazing panelists. So thank you all for agreeing to attend the webinar today. We have Hannah, Andrew, Maggie, and Heidi. I won't say too much about all of you because I think it will be really valuable for everyone listening to hear what you're getting up to from yourselves. So if I could just ask you to let us know a little bit about what you're doing at the moment and how you sort of got to the roles that you're in now, briefly. In terms of order, I guess we could just start alphabetically for this one and go with Andrew. You probably hear that a lot, Andrew.
Yeah. It has some advantages. So thanks for the introduction. So I am the co-founder and chief designer of Spaceforge Limited, which is a startup based in Wales, in the UK. And we are developing reusable satellites for use for the in-orbit manufacturing market. But my full background, and I can go into it, hopefully will come out as we go on. But I spent a number of years working for Thales Alenia Space in the UK, so a big company based in Harwell and Bristol. And also I did spend a bit of time working at Clyde Space and now Clyde AAC Limited as well. So that's briefly about me.
Cool, thank you. Hannah, if you want to go next.
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different background. I'm coming more from astronomy and astrophysics. I recently finished my PhD last year or earlier this year. And I'm now doing a postdoc in astronomy and development in Namibia.
Cool, thank you very much. I just want to add a small insertion here and say that we also have the wonderful Joseph Dudley as a guest as well that I didn't mention. Probably completely my fault, it wasn't on my script, but I would obviously like to introduce Joseph. So if you want to introduce yourself now as an apology. Sorry.
Thanks, Angharad. No problem at all. My name is Joseph, and I work for the Space Skills Alliance along with Heidi. So we look at a lot of data around careers, really trying to improve how the industry as a whole approaches the issue of skill shortages within the space sector. Previously, I worked for UKSEDS, so I helped set up spacecareers.uk 5 years ago now, and do lots of other things with UKSEDS. So it's really brilliant to be back on this podcast.
Cool, thank you very much. If we could go to Heidi now.
Hi, I'm Heidi, and as Joseph said, I work with him with the Space Skills Alliance. So I think he's given a pretty good introduction already. I also worked on space careers as well, so I think we all know what that is now too. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also an astronomer at the Open University, where I study binary stars and how they merge and eventually end their life in a kind of catastrophic sort of way. So bit of a mix there, but that's what I do.
Thanks very much. It's really great to have two people who are very involved in the skills area of the space sector. And last but not least, we'll go to Maggie.
Thanks. So I'm Maggie, and I'm a research fellow at the University of Nottingham, where I teach machine learning and cosmology. And previous to that, I was a research fellow at the European Space Agency for 3 years. I've also got a past in UKSEDS, so as outreach officer for several years. And I run a YouTube channel where I talk about space and science and all sorts of things called Space Mog. So check it out if you've got some time.
Great, thanks very much, everyone. So as I said, everyone watching, please feel free to add any questions that you've got, but we've got some that have been pre-submitted, so I think we'll move straight on to those first of all. So this one's quite a broad question, but I guess you can apply it like just personally to your careers so far. Is that what do you think the best skills that are necessary, the best skills to have in the space sector for your specific jobs? I guess in terms of order, we can just go whichever way. We could go from Maggie this time.
Sure. So for me, this question is like so broad because people think that you just need like one skill to get into the space industry, but there are so many jobs in the space industry, especially like working at ESA. I know that there's not just engineers or scientists there. There's like computer people, there's like we had doctors and nurses on board, we had psychologists there, we had like HR obviously, and there's just so many different jobs to get into the space industry. So I don't think there's a specific skill that you need. For my particular job as a research scientist, it was I guess coding was very important, being able to code, because I used that a lot in my own research, and just I guess the ability to explore my field and like kind of pick out the best kind of research topics to look into and delve into. That is super important for my job. But for the space industry in general, I think that there's no specific best skill to have.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is a really important point, is that a lot of people don't realize just how interdisciplinary the space industry is before they look into it further. So that's great. Thank you. Could we move on to Joseph now?
Yeah, so I mean, I would have to agree with Maggie. We did some research, Heidi and I, a few months ago, looking at what kind of skills are in demand within the space sector, particularly for early careers jobs. So we analysed a lot of jobs from spacecareers.uk. And one of the things we found was that the things that came up the most were not actually so much technical skills, so the kinds of things that you might learn on a typical STEM university course, but the big emphasis on what you might call soft skills, transferable skills. So things like good communication skills, the ability to manage your time and manage projects, and all those additional things that without which you can't do any science, you can't do any engineering. So those are really important and valued by employers across all sorts of different jobs. So, whichever bit of the space sector or even outside of the space sector that you're most interested in, those skills are always going to come in handy. And so they're things that are always worth building up.
Great, thank you. Heidi, do you have anything to add to that on the same sort of wavelength?
No, I think it's been covered really well by Maggie and Joseph, the fact that it is a combination of technical and soft, or kind of, I guess soft isn't the right word because they are really key skills as well, but technical and soft skills are a really good combination to have for the space sector.
Great, thank you. And Andrew, do you have anything to sort of that might be a little bit different coming from a more engineering approach that you think is a really important skill?
Yeah, sorry, that's for me. So first skill is remember to charge your headphones for calls. So hopefully that's now working. So apologies if I cut out. So yeah, I've actually, it's really interesting in terms of engineering skills. So for me, number one skill that you can have in the space industry is ability to learn new skills, which I know is extremely broad and unhelpful, but basically university can't teach you how to build a satellite. It just doesn't happen, and nobody can ever expect you to know how to do a job on day one of that job. And if you are starting a job and you already know it, then that job is not challenging enough for you. So ability to learn new skills, and what do I mean by that is kind of the ability to self-research, and also having the courage to go up to someone and say, I don't understand this, can you help me understand it? That is the number one most important skill, because that's, it's particularly when you're working in the space industry, you may be working on things that have never been built before, building a mission to go explore on a mission of a moon of Jupiter. Nobody can tell you how to do that. There's certainly no textbook can tell you how to do that. In terms of the softer skill, I mean, engineering skills is applicable to what you want. I did electronic engineering at university, and I did become an electronic engineer, but actually the majority of electronic engineering I learned was on the job. You don't really realize that you don't know how to build something until you try and build something. But in terms of soft skills are also very important. So presentation skills. It's actually, in the space industry, you are presenting yourself a lot, and quite often you have to present your research. So your ability to stand up in front of people and say, this is what I did, is important. And ability to write reports, particularly in engineering. If you could be the best engineer in the world, but if you can't write down what you've done and people can't understand it, then you've not done it properly. And particularly with big space missions, they can last 5-10 years from when idea conception to end. So most people don't see a mission all the way through from beginning to end. So your ability to write things down is crucial. So certainly, I know quite often the university projects, you get set a project to write a big report. Embrace that, try and get good with it. That's one of the big things. And just generally self-organization. People don't tell you what to do day to day. You've got to organize yourself. So these are skills you can be learning now.
Great, thank you. Hannah, I know I've asked you at the end, but do you have anything to add to any of these answers?
Yeah, absolutely great answers. I guess the only thing that I would add is make sure that you have evidence to back up the skills that you say that you have. It's easy to write kind of a statement saying, I'm a good leader and I'm a good team player and I'm good at coding. Okay, anyone can say that. Prove why you are good at those things. Say, you organized an event, you ran an astronomy camp, you have won a competition at a hackathon. Really make sure that everything is backed up by evidence for why you are good at the things that you say that you are good at.
Great, thank you. I think that answer kind of leads into sort of the whole CV side of things in terms of how you present all of the skills that you've got and really convey that to someone. So I think a question that follows on from that is just what can someone do, potentially someone at quite an early stage in their career, what do you think that someone could do that would really set themselves apart from other people? Whether this is a really interesting niche skill that you think someone could have or anything like that. If anyone has any comments on that would be great. Yeah, Andrew?
Yeah, so two things. Well, the two things I did. And certainly when, I see a lot of CVs and I have recruited a lot of graduates, and there's two kind of things I really look for. So the first thing I did was enter competitions. So competitions are brilliant for doing this. So UKSEDS regularly hosts competitions, so definitely check those out. I'm personally a big fan of the Olympus Rover Trials. I think it's a brilliant competition. And also, other groups like the Space Generation Advisory Council also do competitions. So just check around for competition, because they're a great way of, they do kind of usually mimic the industry in terms of sometimes you'll be given a challenge which you didn't think up yourself, and you have to think of a problem to it. And it usually demonstrates the key attributes we want, which is learning a new skill, ability to write, ability to present yourself, ability to show your ideas fully formed. So competitions are great, because even getting second, third, or fifth place in something, it shows that you tried, and it shows that you went ahead. Because it's not in the curriculum to do a competition. So do that. That's really important. And just generally extracurricular stuff. So what I look for in the CV is, have you built anything? I know it sounds a bit on, and sometimes it's a bit difficult because of lack of resources, but have you just gone out of your way to try and create something, particularly in a team? So this does happen at university when you get group projects and things to build things. Really, really focus on that and really try and excel at that, because ultimately that's, in the space industry, we're trying to create things, whether it's software, better HR process, or satellites. So that, I think, those are the really key things that you can do to differentiate yourself. And also, quite often you'll have a decision at some point to what you do for like a group project or an individual project. Really try and own that. So try and, certainly with this is what I did for my final year project, I proposed something that I thought would be interesting to do. It was a complete disaster, didn't work, but because I was thinking like, this is a great idea. I tried it, failed, but it helped me get the job because I put myself out there.
I think I would add that it doesn't necessarily need to be directly space related, whatever extracurricular activity you do. For example, if you lead a trampolining club, or you've formed a society to raise money for whatever cause, it shows leadership, it shows team skills, it shows the whole range of interpersonal skills that you'll need to bring to a job. So even if you can demonstrate that you've got those skills through another method, not necessarily a space method, it's going to be very valuable to an employer.
I'd absolutely agree with both of those. I think also the problem I see a lot with applications is actually more in the cover letter than the CV quite often. And it's the bar for a good cover letter is surprisingly low. A lot of people think they're bad at it. But actually, when you're an employer and you're receiving all these applications, some of them are truly terrible. And the best advice I can give that works for really any application is, one, read it out loud to yourself. Because if there's anything that sounds a bit weird or you've made a mistake, you will recognize it. It's much harder when you're reading it, but if you read it out, it becomes a lot clearer. And secondly, let someone else have a look at it, because you're too close to it. So if you let a friend or a mentor or someone you trust read through it, and that can be the careers advice person at your university. It doesn't have to be someone you necessarily know really well, but get them to read through it and give their feedback. You might disagree with what they say, and you can continue to go your own way, but getting a second opinion is really important, because ultimately, you're not the person who's going to be reading it and judging it. It's going to be someone you don't know. And if they misinterpret something or they don't understand something, the more people you can get to read it first and iron out those problems, the more likely it is that actually it's going to have the impact that you are hoping for.
I'm going to kind of disagree with Andrew and Heidi a little bit, but not like completely. So when I was working at ESA, I would see like 100 CVs for traineeship programs. So these are like 3-month programs to 6-month programs working at ESA under a project that I would supervise. And all of these CVs, well, there was like hundreds of them, right? And like they're all, none of them are like the same, because in Europe they have very different styles of CVs to in the UK. So in like some European countries, it's really normal to have your photo, and I guess in the UK it's really like, no, don't put your photo. And I remember like there was one girl who was an artist applying for like a coding job with me. I don't know why. And her like cover of her CV, just a giant photo of her. And it, like we all had a good laugh about it, but I guess that like stood out, but maybe for the wrong reasons. I would say don't cram in all of like the kind of little things that you've done if they're not related. I mean, sometimes they do stick out. For example, I remember one like CV said listed that they've done like loads of ultra marathons, and one of the people on our team was an ultra marathon like runner, so that stuck out to us because of that line. But in general, we just want to see skills that are related to the position. Even like Heidi said, it doesn't have to be completely related, but if it's transferable, that's still fine. Like there were like computer scientists that said, we built these programs and they're related to your kind of project for this reason. But don't like cram in loads of things like trampolining if they have nothing to do with like, I don't know, specific things where you could fill in other skills and attainments that you've had. Because some of these like CVs were like 3 pages long, and we could see like, okay, first page, that's it, we're done.
Great, yeah, thank you very much. That's very helpful for everyone who's thinking about their CVs at this time of year, especially. I guess following on from that a little bit is a question to you guys specifically. If you have any skills perhaps that you developed outside of maybe your degree at the beginning, or something that's not particularly related to the space industry, through something else that you did in your life, like whether it was a hobby or just like a separate interest. Is there anything that you have done that you found that actually that is a really good thing, and I'm really glad I did that and I have that now in my career? If there's anyone who has anything like that, that would be really great to hear.
I guess for me, it's been really important to engage more with societal kind of issues. So reading up on equality, diversity and inclusion, reading up on science communication and sort of misinformation that is quite big now, reading up on policy issues, the issues of say space satellites, kind of really engaging with the current and topical issues that are kind of facing humanity today, and not just kind of having reading maybe a couple articles here and there, but really kind of trying to read some of the science behind those issues, because and also being engaged on, say, committees that are involved with those topics as well, because then you can really sort of learn a lot, you can understand a lot, and these are things that are becoming increasingly more important, already are very important, and organizations also value that knowledge and also see that it's very important that the people that they're hiring kind of have a good understanding. So I would say something like that, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really interesting one that a lot of people will find really useful. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add to this question?
Yeah, in terms of non-space things you can be doing that make you look like a better candidate. I mean, it's tough because it's a little bit like the property ladder. But I think the job ladder is like the property ladder. Once you've got one, it gets easier to get the next one. But certainly any work experience is valid. And I've seen CVs of people who've had like they had a 4-year gap in their CV, and I was like, what happened there? And they were like, well, I was manager for a Tesco's. And I think how is that not relevant to the job, being an engineer? Because of course it is. You're responsible for things. You're responsible for people. You're responsible for getting jobs done. And half of all jobs are the same. They are, do you turn up on time? Do you start fights with co-workers? Do you try and burn the place down? If you can hold down a job for 6 months or even maybe 2 months, you're proving to your employer that at least you meet those 3 criteria. So literally any kind of work experience you can get is good, and highlight it and put it on your CV and everything, because it is unfortunately a ladder. Like, I managed to get a summer placement. I got the 12-month placement. On the back of that, I got the summer placement. On the back of that, I got my first full-time job. So, and my placement was working in a hospital. It wasn't space. So, yeah, that's all I'd say.
I think I'd add that languages also can be something which are not space related whatsoever, but they're very valuable. Space is a very international business, or an international sector. And whilst the working languages of the European Space Agency or many other companies tend to be English, it will be very helpful that if you're going on site visits to French Guiana, or if you're going off to work with another company and they actually work in Spanish, maybe having a little bit of Spanish will help you actually interact and actually create personal connection, even if the working language is English. So having some sort of language skills or language background, or even kind of a placement, if you did an Erasmus scheme, I'm not sure if they're continuing, but if you did that and you worked or studied in France for a year, that could be really helpful to you.
Can I add to Heidi's a little bit? Because I worked in Spain for 3 years at ESA, and even though on site it was an English speaking site, half of the people working there are Spanish. So like if you walked into the canteen and couldn't speak Spanish, it would be quite difficult for you to order your lunch. Even like Spanish aside, a lot of the people working there were French or German, and they tend to cluster together. So if you're in like, I don't know, a coffee room with all Germans, they'll start talking off in German, and sometimes you feel a little bit left out unless you can kind of join in. And even in like our WhatsApp groups, for example, someone will just start speaking Spanish or French or something, and everyone can understand. And it is really helpful to know like some of the like bigger languages that are used throughout the space industry, like German and French.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's good to highlight that the space industry is quite unique in how international it is on like pretty much every level. So that's great. We've just had a submission of a live question, so I thought I would mention that here. The person who submitted it says, I didn't manage to get into the space sector as a graduate, so I'm looking at other sectors to start with the aim to later move into space. Are there any sectors that would best prepare me to later move into the space sectors? I guess this relates a little bit to what you said just now, Andrew, about how your placements weren't completely related to space. And I suppose it might be a bit more difficult in an academic context, but yeah, that's the question that we've had. So if anyone wants to jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I mean, obviously it depends which part of the space sector you want to work in, whether you want to work in project management, engineering, or any other, the many hundreds of roles. But it's all, I mean, I can only really speak for engineering, but it's all transferable. If you work in automotive, you will be building cars to a set of standards, and it's not necessarily, and those standards will be hundreds of pages long. Nobody expects you to learn them all, and you don't need to learn all the European space standards to be able to build a satellite. What you do need to learn is to be able to, how do I go and find the standard that I need for that day, and how do I apply it? So yeah, certainly it's all very transferable. I would say. I'd say day to day, probably working. Okay, I have to say that certainly working in a car designing office is probably about 80% of the same tasks you'd be doing per day than if you're working in a satellite design office. There's no major difference in the fact that maybe the levels of things that you're producing is more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely really valuable, and I hope that the person who asked that question feels that they have a bit more info now and that they can find a route into the space industry. I think we can move back to the original questions now, if that's okay with everyone. So obviously at the moment, we're in a very unique situation, and I'm sure everyone has heard that said on Zoom about 1 million times. But the next point we'd like to move on to is, how do you think that students or people at the beginning of their careers can develop skills or learn new skills completely from home? Because obviously there's quite a limited amount that they can do compared to perhaps if they were in a university setting and doing some more of these competitions. So any big tips on stuff that they can learn at home? I guess we could start with Joseph and Heidi with this one.
Yeah, so I would say a huge number of the skills that I put into use every day in my work are things that I learned at home. I think, a lot of the sort of skills that you get from being involved in student societies like UKSEDS are things that you do learn from home. So I did a lot of stuff with UKSEDS during my time at university. And pretty much all of that was exactly like we're having this conversation now. It was through video calls. We were, coordinating through Google Docs and Slack and all the tools of remote working that have really come into their own in recent months. And the fact that you're not all in the same room doesn't really matter because you're still applying all of those skills of, being able to work with others, communicating clearly, managing projects. And as we have found this year, a huge amount of that work, you don't need to be in the same office. And yes, the vibe is slightly different, right? Like we work differently with people when we're in the same room versus when we're online. But you can recreate a lot of it online, especially if you've always been an online organization, which is certainly true for UKSEDS in the last decade or so. And so you can get all those skills. And there are lots of other opportunities as well. I mean, UKSEDS is just the one that I'm very familiar with, but I'm sure that you can do it with other organizations as well. And the other skills, so I've talked a lot about sort of the transferable skill side of things, but the other one, I think Maggie mentioned it earlier, is programming. And this is, again, is something that came up in the research that Heidi and I did. Because space is a very technology heavy sector, increasingly software and coding are playing a very, very important role there. And when we talk about the growth of the space sector, one of the things that's talked about a lot is the growth of what's called the downstream. So that's using all the data that's coming from space, whether that's scientific data, astronomy data, or whether it's Earth observation or other positioning, timing data, all that sort of stuff. So programming skills, very, very useful in all kinds of jobs, whether you're building the satellite or whether you're using the data from it, and very much something that you can learn at home. There are loads of great free courses online if you want to take something really structured. There are also loads of opportunities. You can just put something together yourself, and Andy's talked about the importance of making something and showing that you've got the wherewithal to just go ahead and do something. It's quite difficult at the moment, unless you've got a wonderful workshop like Andy's, as we can see there, to really be physically building something. But you can certainly digitally build something. You can do all sorts of exciting things with code and do them from the comfort of your own home without having to go outside during a pandemic. So lots of opportunities there, I think.
I'm not sure I could add anything more because I think that sums it up. But I guess a couple of things I could probably recommend would be, as Joseph mentioned, learning online coding. Check out online courses, MOOCs, for example. So very recently, Copernicus, kind of Earth observation in Europe, had a very good online MOOC called the Copernicus MOOC or something uninventive like that. But that was really good because it was a 10-week course that guided you through where you get Earth observation data, how you use it, how it relates to sustainable development goals, and how you can actually interact with code for specific purposes. So they're worth checking out. And a combination of building and coding, you might want to check out Raspberry Pi. They're very cheap computers where you can do a whole load of really good coding courses and build little things. And they're fairly cheap. So I'd definitely recommend those.
Yeah, I'd say the same with Heidi. I was just going to say that, like, as part of our machine learning course, we have driverless cars and we have to like program them, but they're made from like Raspberry Pis and we built them ourselves and they're like that big. But you can get like cats and dogs and all sorts of things that you have to build yourself and then code them up. And they're relatively cheap, like less than £100 or so. So they're always something that you could do at home. I have a question rather than a comment as well. Is there like somewhere on the Space Careers website that lists all the different kind of MOOCs that might be relevant? Because that might be something that could be really useful to people. I know like several like spacey kind of MOOCs that people have done, so I could help contribute some if you have a list or something, a website or something for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like we definitely have like a sort of more, yeah, the competitions and are all listed on there, and we tend to just upload them as and when they come out. So I think there are some articles. It's definitely something to look into, to maybe make a bit more of a permanent fixture of on the website. That would be great. So it's a very good idea.
If I could,
Yes,
so
yeah,
just
go ahead.
very quickly add, which is just to say, yeah, I mean, think what you say is great, and I would just put a slight caveat on the Raspberry Pi angle, and I would say, so from my perspective, Arduino. And the reason I say Arduino is because A, you can pick one up for about £9, an Arduino Nano, and B, because they're much more about interfacing to the outside world, attaching motors, attaching batteries, making things actually move, building a tiny robot. And yeah, okay, Joseph very rightly pointed out, I do have a very nice garage. This is about 15 years worth of accumulation of tools. Certainly when I started out, when I was a student, all I had was a desk, an Arduino Nano, and a pair of scissors to cut the wires with, and a Stanley knife to strip them. That you can do a lot. You can build a small robot with that, and that I cannot guarantee. I cannot emphasize enough. Building a little robot that goes is a great thing to do, and there's one massive shortage in the space industry, and that is analog electronic engineers. And in fact, there's a massive shortage worldwide of analog electronic engineers, people who understand how to interface to the outside world. Certainly appreciating software is really important, but also the software ultimately has to do something in the real world. So if you become an analog electrician, basically, if you want to be paid well as an engineer, become an analog engineer or a nuclear engineer. They're the two that are most in demand. But that's all.
And one quick final thing from me, I would say from my personal experience, I always find it quite hard to motivate myself to kind of engage with all the MOOCs and really learn by myself. So if you're kind of a person like me that maybe needs a little bit extra support by working with other people on a project, or maybe, if you've never done anything like this before, like coding or Arduino or whatever, and you feel a bit daunted by it, there are ways in which you can kind of online kind of meet up with other communities or take part in a hackathon where people are really willing to help you and to guide you. A lot of science camps as well have become online. Most are actually completely free. So don't get too overwhelmed. At least for me, I get overwhelmed by all of the opportunities online, because really now is in a way a convenient time to have a pandemic, because we have so many resources compared to 10, 20 years ago where you wouldn't be able to get all the skills that you can now.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that will be very helpful for everyone. I'll just check if we've had any more live questions. I don't think we have, so I'll stick with the ones that we already have listed. We haven't got too much time left, so I'll just briefly mention at the end that the government has recently announced that there's new degree apprenticeships for the space sector. For all of you listening, if you weren't aware, It's a really cool new thing that has come about in the last couple of months. So I wanted to ask all of our panelists, what is your opinion on these as a way to get into the space profession? Despite how new they are, do you think that they're widely recognized? And do you think that doing apprenticeships are a great new way to get into the space sector, basically? I guess we could start and go back the other way from Hannah, if you have any opinions on these, if you could share.
I think probably actually, because I come from an academic background, I think other people would be better answering this.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we could go to Andrew for this one. Sorry to rely on you for a lot of the engineering side of things.
It's fine. Yeah, apprenticeship is it's really interesting because it is new, and certainly when I was at Thales Alenia Space, we were basically waiting for it to start. And so I don't know what their opinion is, because I left earlier this year, but I think everyone sees it as a good thing. It certainly is a very recognised thing to do in this country, and certainly a lot of the I wouldn't say the word older, but certainly more experienced engineers that I've worked with started out as apprentices, because this was in the 80s and 70s when apprenticeships were way more accepted. This was the way you got into these kind of jobs. So certainly the thing you've got to watch out for with apprenticeship is it, what do you want to end up doing? So do you want to end up being the kind of person who's designing satellites, say? And if so, you need to check that your apprenticeship course is going to give you the kind of skills like report writing, like presentation skills, given the opportunity to work on, do your own design work and that kind of thing, that will help you flourish and push forward on that. So I'm not familiar with the course, but certainly if I saw a CV on my desk and it came through a space apprenticeship, I would very closely look at that person and say, okay, it'd be interested to see what they'd be like.
Great, thank you. I was wondering if you had anything to add to that, Maggie, in terms of maybe your experience in ESA. Did you see anyone who came through that process, who started in an apprenticeship?
Honestly, I don't think I saw anyone who came through it as an apprenticeship, but I think it is really important that we have these kind of things, because the UK space industry is growing so quickly. And if you want to take the traditional route and get people through their bachelor's and potentially a PhD before they get into the space sector, you've got so many years before they can jump into it. And this is kind of like a fast track way into it. So I think it's really important to address this with our growing industry.
Yeah, if I could add to that. So the program that's just been launched around these space engineering technician apprenticeships, that's something that's been developed in partnership with industry, and I think the University of Leicester has led on it from the academic side. And so it's very much been based on the needs of industry, and trying to address those specific needs for technical skills in various areas of space, but particularly looking at manufacturing of spacecraft, satellite integration, all that sort of stuff. And that's something where quite often graduate schemes they don't always touch on it, and certainly university courses don't always, because they don't tend to be that well integrated with industry, whereas apprenticeship schemes are much more closely aligned to the needs of industry. And because you are working for a company at the same time, you're getting a lot of hands-on experience, which is not better or worse necessarily than the theoretical knowledge that you'd get on a course. But the combination of the two makes it really, really valuable. And quite often, the people who have gone through the technician route, are the people who really know everything well, because they've worked on every little component and they know the whole system. And the graduates turn up and are sort of nominally more qualified, because there's this sort of we think of a university degree as being better in some way than an apprenticeship, but that's just not true. They're different approaches, and you need that combination of the two. And one of the challenges for technical sectors, which space is beginning to experience, is that if you send everybody down the graduate route, you're missing out on a lot of those skills and that really important experience. And that's why then this program has been developed. So it's a really good route if you just want to get on and actually building things in the way that Andy has talked about.
Great, thanks very much. If no one else has anything to add to that they want to say, I'm afraid that is the last question that we have time for on the webinar today. So I'd like to just say a massive thank you to all of you for being on the panel and sharing your experiences. It's been really invaluable. I'm sure to all of the listeners, I've definitely found it very useful. And just sharing your different routes into the sector and the interesting skills that you've recommended. And thank you to everyone listening at home, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. We really value your feedback, so if you could take the time to just fill out the short feedback form beside this webinar, if you've listened and enjoyed or not enjoyed, we'd be really grateful. And to find out about all the other episodes in the series, past and present, just follow UKSEDS and Space Careers on Twitter, Facebook, and we're also on LinkedIn and Instagram. And you can sign up to the UKSEDS newsletter as well on ukseds.org. On most of our social media platforms, we've linked all of the speakers today, so definitely go and give them a follow as well, because obviously they're very knowledgeable on all of these sorts of things. So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you again to our wonderful panelists. And please join us again next time for another webinar on careers in the space sector.